The Dark Fate of Warriors' Wives. After Ottoman Conquest, you're a woman in the spring of 1453. The air smells of smoke and blood. Constantinople, once called the Queen of Cities, is falling. Your husband died defending the walls. Now the pounding of Ottoman boots echoes through the streets. You clutch your child and pray the soldiers will pass your door. They don't. When the Ottomans entered a conquered city, the killing wasn't chaos. It was a process. Historians often tell us about the empire's grandeur, their mosques, palaces, and poetry. But buried beneath that splendor lies a record of industrialized cruelty, a system so precise that even human suffering was itemized, priced, and archived. Before we continue, if you're drawn to history's hidden truths, subscribe to Tortured Past. These are the stories the world chose to forget. When Constantinople fell on May 29, 1453, the Ottoman victory was not just military, it was administrative. Sultan Mehmed II had issued orders long before the final assault. Once the city was taken, soldiers were to follow the harvest protocol, a bureaucratic system designed to process human spoils. Men and boys above 12 were executed systematically, not in battle, but in lines, one after another. This was not rage, it was regulation. Every execution cleared the way for the next step, the separation and categorization of the living. Women and girls became state property the moment the city surrendered. Ottoman military law, preserved in documents still stored in Istanbul, classified captives by age, health, and utility. Girls as young as 12 were taken aside, inspected, and registered into imperial records. To the scribes, they weren't human beings. They were data. Witnesses describe marketplaces forming within hours of conquest. Public squares turned into sorting stations. Children screaming for their mothers, soldiers marking their faces with chalk to show ownership, and clerks writing values beside their names, or more often their numbers. Some were bound for the Sultan's palace, others for military camps, and the rest for the slave markets of Bursa, Aleppo, and Cairo. But what happened to the wives of fallen warriors was far worse than simple captivity. In Ottoman military doctrine, a defeated man's wife was considered a rightful prize of war. Her fate was tied to her husband's death, and his loyalty was repaid through her humiliation. She was reclassified as Ganimet, war booty, and passed through an official claiming process that treated her like livestock. This system wasn't a side effect of war. It was the empire's foundation. The Ottomans had turned human trauma into an instrument of control. Each conquered woman became a weapon, used not only to satisfy soldiers, but to destroy the spirit of resistance. Records from the 15th and 16th centuries describe how these women were forcibly converted, renamed, and reassigned new identities. Conversion wasn't a matter of faith, it was psychological warfare. They were forced to recite Islamic declarations under threat of death, often while standing over the bodies of their families. Many were given new Turkish names immediately, severing the last link to who they once were. Archaeological studies in former Ottoman strongholds show facilities where these women were held before redistribution, complexes with narrow cells, drainage systems, and isolation rooms designed to break their will. Chroniclers wrote of training centers where captives were prepared for service. Behind those words were rituals of degradation that erased everything human from them. The empire treated reproduction as an economic resource. Some captives were placed into breeding programs to produce children for imperial households. Detailed ledgers recorded pregnancy rates, birth outcomes, and the value of offspring based on appearance and gender. This was not random cruelty. It was a state-managed industry of human ownership. Within 48 hours of Constantinople's fall, tens of thousands of women and children had been processed through these channels. Many were loaded onto ships bound for foreign markets. Ottoman naval logs recorded them beside bolts of silk and sacks of pepper. The entries were chillingly casual. 15 females, ages 15-20, in good health. and those who remained behind were forced into marriages that were anything but voluntary. The Empire's legal codes permitted soldiers to claim the wives of dead enemies as spouses, transforming rape into law. All it required were 3 witnesses. Once the claim was approved, the woman's name was struck from her city's record and added to the Ottoman registry. Her husband's death was her legal erasure. Over time, the system became self-perpetuating. Military success wasn't measured only in territory gained, but in captives taken. Generals were rewarded not for how many soldiers they killed, but for how many women they captured. The Empire's own chroniclers describe with pride how the yield of women increased the Sultan's favor. This pattern repeated across the Balkans, Anatolia, and the Middle East. Cities learned to surrender without a fight because resistance meant annihilation, but surrender didn't spare them. Even compliant towns saw their women divided and distributed under the same bureaucratic machine of conquest. The Ottomans had mastered psychological warfare. They understood that the destruction of a family was more effective than any cannon. By weaponizing motherhood, by turning wives into property, they made sure no generation could rise against them again. Yet the records that describe these horrors were never hidden. They were preserved, neatly copied, bound, and stored. Ottoman clerks didn't see their work as evil. They saw it as administration. They left behind what might be the most chilling evidence of all, proof that systematic cruelty can wear the face of order. The story of what the Ottomans did to the wives of their enemies isn't just about one empire's brutality. It's a mirror held up to human nature. It shows how civilization can disguise exploitation as duty and how history can turn suffering into policy. The archives still exist. The ink has faded, but the truth remains. Every line written by an Ottoman scribe was a life erased, a name replaced by a number, a wife turned into property. And perhaps the most haunting part of it all, they believed it was justice. If stories like this make you question what we think we know about history, subscribe to Tortured Past. There are hundreds more truths buried in forgotten archives, and we're here to uncover them.